exploring your values. We are going to spend about 30 minutes exploring values. Might have done some of this work before, so it might be a bit of a reminder or a refresher. Or I kind of like to use this if I get a bit stuck sometimes, or if I've got decisions coming up and I think, okay, let's check back in with values. Can they help to give me some kind of direction? So that's what we're going to be doing. Come with an open mind, just see where your thoughts go. It's just a 30-minute exploration and then we will gather again. So let's begin. So, as usual, with another door, it is all about just thinking space. So, I just want you to make sure that you switch off notifications, any distractions, and just allow yourself to go exploring and see what comes up because values are so important. So, let's start here, as they say. Let's just think about values in the context of driving your work. I think that's what we're mostly here for. However, I do want to place in your mind that values are not just obviously work. And there's a few things that might come out. So just tune into that when you're exploring. Your work is aligned to your values, but sit with that because sometimes we get some really interesting views, some interesting thoughts around it. You know why this work matters to you. That's kind of the important bit. And again, might not be work. It might be just the thing that you're doing or the thing that you're currently thinking about. It's why it matters to us. So just sit with those thoughts as we go through. Absolutely love this quote. Michelle Obama, I have learned that as long as I hold fast to my beliefs and values and follow my own moral compass, then the only expectations I need to live up to are my own. I just sit with that quote sometimes because sometimes we wrestle a lot with the shoulds, the things that we think we should be doing, or we see things that we make us feel kind of like, things are not on the path for me. However, if we're true to our values and we are living by them, then that's all we can do for ourselves. So I think it's a really interesting experience to think about. Yeah, there's all of these things that I could be doing, should be doing, everybody's doing X, Y, Z, but what am I doing? What am I doing for me that's honoring my values? So, what are values? I'm going to suggest a few things, but really, I want you to define it. I've done so much research on values. There's so much out there now. It's a huge, huge space of interest and curiosity. But actually, what I come to the conclusion is that you have to actually define what values are to you, how you use them, how you bring them into your life. So I'm going to go through a few things that maybe resonate with you, maybe not, but pick the thing that kind of really aligns with you. So values are not what we do, but values are how we do it. Huge piece of work. There's a book I read all about values, and I can put some recommendations um, in the chat at the end if you're interested. But it's all about how we show up. Obviously, there's a link to what we're doing, but keep bearing in mind it's how we are doing it. How are we showing up? The words we use, the language we use, the thoughts we use. This is a stronger direction sometimes of values. Values are a moral compass. They show us what we think is right, wrong, the path that we think we should be going down. Values guide us to make good decisions. That's certainly how I bring it into some of my work. So, as I said, when I get stuck sometimes or I have to make a decision, I will bring some values thought into that. Values help us prioritize because we're all prioritizing something. So, is it the things we want to? Are we intentionally prioritizing the things that are important to us? Values can unite us, connect us. They can encourage conversation and fresh perspective, especially if we be surrounded by people with different values. We can learn and grow by hearing different perspectives. It's important to acknowledge that values can also cause resistance. They can also help us to understand, that's why this isn't clicking or it's not flowing or something feels off. So be aware that values can also cause resistance. They can disconnect us and they can change. Your personal values have probably changed from 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Sometimes it's circumstantial. And again, it's for you to own that. I know that there's so many people out there that tell us what values are, and it's all really good, interesting stuff, but I just think it's for you to own what it is for you. I think they're a behavioral shift when we want them to be, when we're conscious of them, and they can show up throughout our work and our life, but they also are sometimes working whether we know it or not. So that's what we're going to explore. So, quickly, without much thought, scribble down what your values are. Of course, we're going to do this in a lot more detail, but we're just unruffling the surface. Of course, we are. We like a good unruffling. Just scribble down what you think your values are if you were to be asked right now. We're going to build on these. Of course, we are. We're going to explore in more detail, but we're just unruffling. You might have done some work on this and you're kind of sure of it. What are your values? And I'm going to place an idea again for you to play with. You might agree, you might disagree. That's completely up to you. You might have personal values, but you also might have work values. And I know that some work, I think Brené Brown particularly says, you cannot, you just have one set of values. But I found some other pieces of work that suggest that actually values, of course, are us, but some are dialed up more for work, more in personal life. And when we're more aware of it, we can actually help ourselves a little bit better. So this is up to you to decide if you if you want to agree with that as you explore. But I wanted to place it out there because it's an interesting thought. Maybe there's some different values that you bring to work. It kind of makes sense to a degree. So, where does it fit in all of your self-awareness, your self-development? Well, values kind of fit in this triangle that I use so much in Another Door work, where we're looking to ask questions about purpose, identity, belief, strength, circumstance. Values is right in the middle, and it's really the question of what are the things that are most important to me, that I stand for, that matter to me. And really, values are the thing that then create action. They're the things that move us. So, what we're going to explore today, what your values are, what's important to you, what you stand for. And I want you also to tune into resistance. Because as we start thinking about this, sometimes the stuff that we find kind of difficult or uncomfortable or we have resistance equally gives us some insight to help us in our development. So as you're thinking about values, when we start this next exercise, not just to think about who you are and the values, but also the things you think, oh, no, because it's interesting insight. There might also be values that come up and you're curious and you think, well, what is that? Because as we said, values shift. So it might be that you're kind of curious about something and you want to explore it. Like, is that one of my values? And I never knew. So hold space for a little bit of curiosity, a little bit of resistance showing up, as well as this kind of confirmation of the values that you have right now. So we're gonna put on screen in a minute sets of values that come up, and I just want you to tune in and out to see what connects. Maybe start scribbling down all of the ones that you think, yeah, that's what I stand for. But also capture the ones that you're curious about and the ones that you have resistance for. And it might be when I start sharing this list in a minute that words aren't on the screen that are coming up for you, they're sparking other ideas. Of course, that's fine. These have got to be your words, your values. So just start scribbling down what's coming up for you. If you connect with some of the things that are on screen in a minute, you think, yes, this is me, this is what I'm all about, scribble it down. But be aware of this kind of curiosity and the resistance as well. And you just start scribbling as many as possible. This isn't about just choose one or two at the moment. This is just go through this list as it comes on screen and just see what comes up. Where does your energy go? Let's start. So I'm not going to read them out. I'm going to just put them on screen in the quiet. I just want you to allow your eyes and your thoughts just glaze over and just see what's coming up for you and just start scribbling. Maybe there are some that really represent you and you think, yes, completely, that's my word, grab hold of it. But maybe there's others that catch your eye and you think, what? That's really odd. Or that's really curious. Note it all down. Keep moving your eyes around the screen, see what grabs your attention, notice where your thoughts go. Maybe there's something that's really driving your thoughts right now in this moment in time in your life. So maybe there's a surprise there. Maybe there's something a little bit uncomfortable that's coming up that you might have to explore a bit further. I remember once I ran this workshop and somebody was sharing about wealth coming up for them, and they never thought that that was the thing. However, it was becoming quite important to them for various personal reasons. They couldn't quite articulate it through this workshop, but it came up as a curiosity. So it's an example of where you might not be exactly clear on why this is speaking to you right now, but capture it. The things that matter to you, the things you stand for. In your scribbles, you're almost starting to tell the story of yourself to yourself. Yes, this is who I am. This is what's important. Now, what we're going to do next is where does this show up in your life? We're going to move into the next part. If you want this list, just you can come back and freeze it on the list, or I will provide a list that you can print off. But we'll keep moving to keep the thoughts going. You might have lots of scribbles. Let's now try and work through them. So, we're exploring values, how they show up, and acknowledging there might be resistance or conflict or something that kind of tells a story of why sometimes we feel uncomfortable or things don't click, or a story of why sometimes we maybe don't get on with people or our organizational values are in conflict with our personal values. So they can start to tell you all kinds of stories. So have a look at what you've scribbled. Maybe pull out a few bits of insight that maybe start to make sense for you. Maybe there's a few patterns that you can see that you could group together. Maybe there's something that's more dominant than the rest. Just start pulling out. Just take a bit of time to see what you've scribbled on the piece of paper. What's it telling you? What's it speaking to you? For the sake of today, just pick three guiding values that are really feeling strong right now. Now, these can change. You can go away and do more work and change actually how you kind of view them and the lens that they provide. But just for now, pick out the three that are shouting to you the most. Now, these can be maybe three that you think, yes, these are me. Or it might be one that you're curious about, or one that you kind of feel really strongly about that you want to, oh, why have I got such resistance to that? This is your path, but pull out three things to kind of work with. So when I did this a couple of years ago, one thing that came out for me was creativity came out in all different ways. And when I sat and thought, well, how is it showing up right now? It wasn't. I didn't feel like the way I interpret creativity just wasn't anywhere in my life at that point. So it was a really interesting thing to sit with. And again, your values are for you to interpret. They're how you translate them. It's interesting that sometimes we have lots of different interpretations on values. So even if you think, oh, we all share values, we all maybe have a different view of what that is. So it's interesting to hold that space as well. Like, what does this mean to you? So I sat with creativity and I scribbled down the things around it. What does that mean? And it was really interesting what came up. It's like, wow, I don't have any of this stuff. I'm not creating. I'm not kind of just being free to explore problems in the way that I want to. And it was really interesting just to sit with that. So look at what you've written and just expand. Like, what does it mean to you? When you look at your list, there may be some real dominant values, but let's acknowledge there may be some dormant ones. So, like the example I've just given, I certainly put creativity in one of my three, but I realized actually, even though it's coming out really strong and shouting at me, it's dormant, it's sleepy, it's not active. So then I had to decide, well, do I want to bring more of that? Will that bring me fulfillment? Will that help me to energize myself? Do I want to bring it back into focus or am I kind of happy it's dormant? Because sometimes we have values that are just a bit sleepy and it's okay as long as we know that. The work that I do with values is about awareness of your values. It's not about they all have to show up all the time. I don't think that's possible all the time. So it's more about just being aware of what they are doing. And sometimes they are quiet and sometimes they're really loud. And actually, even then, sometimes they're not helpful. So just think about those dominant values, how they're showing up. Be aware of the resistance. And then think about, okay, thinking about that, what do I really want to dial up and be focused on? What's going to help me right now? And maybe I do need to just dial down some. So again, my work, so creativity was one of the things that came up, and loyalty was one of the things that came up for me a couple of years ago. And when I sat with it, I was really proud of loyalty. I was like, yes, this is a very good value. I really stand for loyalty. But when I sat with it a little bit more, I realized that it was actually holding me back or it was making me feel sad because I felt like I was really doing a lot of things and I wasn't getting the same back from people. I felt like there wasn't loyalty coming back. So actually, it wasn't helping me at all. I'll always have loyalty as a value, but I need to be aware of sometimes there's a little bit of conflict or resistance, or actually, I just need to dial down and say, it's okay if people are not loyal. Just because that's your value doesn't mean you get it back. So you see how you can start to have a conversation with your value that really helps you to own it a bit more. So a couple of years ago, yeah, I dialed down loyalty. I can't get rid of it. Of course I can't, because that's keeps coming up. It's one of my strong values, what I stand for. But I can be aware of it in a different way. And let's just bring in a little bit of Ikigai. You know that it's always useful to do a little bit of Ikigai because we use this quite a bit in some of our work. But I do think it's really interesting to think about the values that are guiding your why. If we think about Ikigai, as we've said before, it's not always about being right in that sweet spot of Ikigai, right in the middle, but it's a useful diagram to sort of work around what's important to you right now. So if it's like, well, I'm trying to find work and actually I just need money right now, I just need to get paid for it. Like that's the only circle I'm in right now. And, the wealth value is coming on strong for whatever reason. That's fine. It tells the story of that. If you're wanting to dial up, look, I need more joy in what I'm doing, doing things because I love it. Again, your values can kind of help to guide the why. So just have a little play with that. It might give you some more story, some more depth, or it might not. Some people get real nuggets through thinking about it this lens, but not always. This is just about owning why you do what you do. The world needs this is always an interesting one with values because I think it plays quite hard, but sometimes we need honest conversations. Sometimes we do work that you think, oh, I don't really know if the world actually needs this, but I could do with the money. I'm really good at this. So, it's fine as long as you own the reason. So, we're thinking about how values show up in work, how they help us progress, how they might hold us back, being aware of that. Just coming back to that very first thing that we started exploring, an acknowledgement of how do I use values? Am I aware of the fact that I'm using values when I'm making decisions, when I'm having conversations with people, and problem solving? Maybe when you're having low days, when you're a bit fed up. Maybe it's to get creativity. Maybe there's been some sparks when you've been looking at your values. So it's bringing it all together to think about, well, how can I use them? How can I own this? And doing it your way. How can you use your values right now to help you with what you're trying to do? Just a little random, because I like a little random. I love this model, Hofstede's culture onion. It's always kind of interesting one to explore. If you're in an organization and teams, then this is kind of a really obvious one, but I do think it's interesting from a personal point of view. We have values in the middle, and it's the things that we see, do, feel, this the way things are around us. So you can kind of see that in an organizational setting, that's kind of an easy thing sometimes to articulate, although an interesting one because we often all have very different views on this. But this culture onion is then, well, it's not just the values actually that dictate these things, the things we see, do, feel. What else is going on around us? Rituals, heroes, symbols. Now, just sit with that in a work context. We can think, yeah, rituals. So, okay, our values are one thing. Do rituals back it up? Frequency of meetings, how people show up, the things that kind of happen in the organization or team that kind of reinforce what you think these values are. And then the heroes, who's celebrated around us that confirm values or distract or confuse us. And then symbols around us that are, again, either reinforcing or detracting. So, in an organizational setting, you can see that as a really interesting conversation. But in a personal view, where you sit right now, you will have some of this stuff. The things around you, the rituals you're doing, are they honoring values? For example, my creativity, if I was saying, yes, creativity is a very strong value of mine, it's what I stand for, the freedom to create. If I don't have a ritual that's kind of helping me with that, who are the heroes that I'm thinking are, around me that are role modeling? What symbols are there in my life that are kind of saying that this is important? kind of interesting, isn't it? And then we can kind of sit with these questions of, right, okay, so how is the culture around us serving us? Is there conflicts with values? And then maybe I need to change some things, or maybe this is where we can have conversation about what needs to change in the world. It's kind of where sometimes those conversations come from because we are seeing things around us and we're judging them through our lens and we're looking for the rituals, the heroes, the symbols. This is Hofstede's terminology. But they're all should be reinforcers. Otherwise, this is where we start to feel uncomfortable. So I wanted to introduce that as I think it's an interesting one, just to bring our thoughts, juggle them around, and ruffle some more ideas about values before we move into our final little bit of thinking, which is this thought that I introduced at the beginning. You might have a variance of personal and work values. You might not. You might be one of the believers that are like, no, values are values, and that's what it is. But I took a bit of inspiration from an interview with Beyonce. She talked about values and then kind of built it up into sort of personal brand and character. But it was really interesting. The conversation started with values. And she said some of her values are in a work environment, in performance. It's about giving the best you can be, going out there, owning it, delivering for audience. You know, those were her values, but she had to put on a different persona to do that. Sasha Fierce came into full force. Whereas she's not living those values in a home life. She's not showing up every day in the kitchen going, right, okay, full performance, which I kind of like that idea, but you can kind of see how you need to play with this to make it work for you. So I really, really like that conversation. It kind of got me thinking about dialing up values, dialing down values, and what ones really show up for us at work. And I know we're always told to be our authentic self, but I do think that authentic self is, you owning how you want to be at work, how you want to be in personal life. That is you. Beyonce can do it, we all can do it. So introduce that as a thought. And sometimes it's okay that there's this bit in the middle, personal values, work values. And then we just understand sometimes the work that we want to do. That's where we can get our engagement and connection and where energy comes from when actually this does overlap. But sometimes if there's no overlap, we can understand it. So I just wanted to sort of introduce that because I do think it kind of overflows into the work that we do and why it matters to you. Sometimes our values are driving our focus and attention. They might help us prioritize, but they might be a distraction. They'll definitely help us to understand what we need and want so we can make good decisions. So just look at your scribbles, look at what's come up and start to think of a couple of insights and takeaways that you've got from the session today that could be really useful. It might be something that you want to go and sit with and work on more, or it might be, right, these are my 3 values, I'm going to live by them. So just spend a little bit of time on that. I'm going to close off the workshop. If you want more time to think about this with others, maybe think of somebody who's also working on this stuff. And it's a good opportunity to just jump on a call and bounce ideas around because sometimes it takes a while to really cement your ideas. There's so much unruffling goes on when you start to think about values. It's always good to have a little buddy. So that's one thing you can do if you've still got lots of thoughts and ideas on it.